And welcome
Welcome
back.
back. Welcome back to Astrology Today with Jeff Harmon. As you know, I'm his assistant, Ella. And gosh, Jeff, you want to start off this episode, which is our third episode, talking about the current energies, right?
I do. Yeah. Because, I don't think anyone needs astrology to tell them that the world's a pretty insane place right now. We've got the midterm elections coming up. Furthermore, we got a lot of tensions going on with the Saudi Arabians are now getting irritated with Biden. Of course, everybody's irritated with Biden. But the bottom line is, he's pushing them for more oil and making comments. And there's been a lot of offenses. Yeah. And he's, of course, groveling at the feet of the Venezuelans and all that. So this all ties into the eclipse that's coming up. It also ties in very powerfully to the Mars retrograde that's coming up.
Right.
Now, we've been seeing the Fed ratchet up interest rates on a continuous basis. And, it's really thwarting a lot of things. So what's really going on here, big picture? Well, I was looking at the United States chart. There's no question. We've got Mars retrograding right exactly on the air trine and earth trines of the United States. So right over the air trine, actually. So the earth trine is affected too, but the air trine is affected most. And what's so powerful about this is we also have Mars retrograding in a lunar mansion that is extremely, extremely powerful. In fact, I'm looking at this right now just to make sure I get this all right. Yeah. Clearly, this is going to cause a lot of trouble here. I think there's going to be not only more financial kind of decline, I think the recession is going to kind of hold for a while, only because the Saturn-Uranus square is actually separating right now. Now, that's usually an indicator of a major, major recession, but we're kind of already in it. They're just not admitting that we are. We've been in it. So the next thing that I'm seeing here is when Mars goes retrograde and this eclipse is activated, which is the eclipse happens on the 25th. Mars goes retrograde on October 30th. What's a problem here is the moon south node, also known as K2, is really triggering this Mars. They're actually aspecting each other by what we call an air trine. So the nakshatra or lunar mansion that Rahu's in is really kind of weird because it's ruled by Mars, which is very aggressive, and it's aspecting a retrograde Mars over the top of the air trine of the United States and also hits the moon. All this means lots of turmoil, lots of change. I'm hearing a lot of rumors that the midterm elections are going to get disrupted and there's going to be a nuclear weapon and all this. I hope, that's not true. I get it's not. I think somehow, some way, these elections are going to go on. Yes, they're going to manipulate things. But in the end, it kind of looks like the Democrats are going to get a hit here. Though they'll manipulate a lot and probably come out real close. But overall, if I'm reading this all right, that's what it looks like is we're going to have a lot of dissension, a lot of disruption, but I think the midterm elections are going to go on. What's interesting, though, is this Mars goes retrograde literally for the next 3.5, 4 months. I mean, this doesn't come out of here until it's actually almost closer to 5 months. Here, I can actually share the screen so that you can see a little bit about what I'm talking about. For what it's worth, it kind of helps to show these types of things. And you can see here, I'll share the screen and then drop back. This is the United States chart. And people can see here, this outer box is the transits using the Nadi astrology. And the south node here is K2. And if everybody remembers, the south node is where eclipse happens, and so is the north node. So the south node is always the tail of the dragon. It brings disruption and change and so on and so forth. So what's going on is you can see here, we've got the south node in the air sign of Libra, aspecting Mars and all these planets of the United States in the air trine and also the moon. See, Libra, Gemini, and Aquarius are the moon trines. A little hard to see, but you get the idea. You can see where I'm tracing here. So very important stuff. So the word is This is going to be a lot of tension, a lot of pushy attention. The eclipse is also bringing a lot of tension, I think, not just on the United States, but globally. We're also hearing China making threats that they've now completely seized Hong Kong, and they're rattling sabers saying they're going to go in and take Taiwan. So this all is stuff that we'll continue to cover in the future. But I can tell you the cocktail here is for some very dicey stuff. I personally think this is what the owners want. I think that they really are looking for dissension. We'll see where this all goes. But I just wanted to give you that update. And then I guess now we can get briefly to the next portion of what we wanted to talk about. So that's a little update. I'll keep you posted on all that. So I guess next, Ella, if you want to introduce what we're going to talk about on the location stuff.
It's one of my favorite things about astrology is the location astrology. And just, it's interesting how we all land in a place, living someplace, right? And
yes, we do.
I mean, we don't.
You got to live somewhere, even if it's under a bridge, right? I see a lot of those folks here in Los Angeles.
Who knows what the energy is there? You know, it could be good for someone. Not that we want anyone to live under a bridge, but it's interesting when you talk about energies and location and where our energy thrives, right? So I know it's different for both of us, right? Which is so interesting. Different.
Oh, it's different for everybody. Yeah, every single human being on the planet is going to have their own specific location astrology. And here, I'll share the screen again and show you. This is fascinating stuff. Back in the 70s, I really got exposed to this stuff with a man named Jim Lewis. And of course, many of the earlier astrologers, my mother and Robert Hand and so many others. Essentially, everyone's familiar with their birth chart and they all know their sun signs, right? But what's really fascinating about location astrology is location is, again, the science of literally, if I can keep my computer up here, where is the energies for you. So I'm just going to put up a mock chart here because I don't want to use anybody's chart. And what you're noticing here on the screen is just a random chart for today. But if this was a birth chart, let's say a child was born just now, right now, this would be their birth chart.
Right.
And notice all the glyphs of the planets. And for anybody who's interested, there's a great video on my YouTube channel about the glyphs of the planets. They're very, very sacred. Remember, I'll just cover it real briefly here. All the glyphs of the planets come from the sun, which is the seed of creation, the moon, which is the crucible, and the cross. And of course, we all know dad puts the seed where? In mom's womb. The baby nurtures, and then spirit becomes manifest on the four elements. Also, same analogy. Farmer puts seed in the ground, the womb of the earth nurtures it, and it becomes manifest as the crop grows. So why that's important is because when you look at these maps, every single planet is combinations of the circle of the sun, the crescent of the moon, and the cross. Look at Saturn as the cross over the crescent of the moon. It represents work and karmas, you see. Jupiter is exactly the opposite. Look at its glyph, the crescent of the moon over the cross. So you can see this, you know, and Mercury is the crescent of the moon over the sun, over the cross. Venus is the sun over the cross. And of course, Mars is always, we don't have a Mars line here, but we will somewhere, I promise you. Mini Mars decided not to.
Going to show up.
Yeah, he's going to show. There he is, right up there. See, it's the arrow over the sun. Now, this is actually very ancient. And this is a really cool glyph I use a lot in readings that allows you to kind of see. See, Saturn seems to operate right above our normal consciousness. This big, thick dashed line could be, you could say, the demarcation between the conscious mind, subconscious mind. So Saturn lines tend to have karmas, or you could say work to be done, right? Jupiter is always blessed. It always brings expansion and opulence. Venus is always artistic creativity and desires. Mars is always aggression, intensity, and Mercury is logic and intuition. So you can really apply that when we look at location astrology. I want to be brief today, but I'm just going to give a really brief introduction. Notice every one of these planets either has AS, MC, DS, or IC next to the planetary glyph. Well, the AS nomenclature means it's ascending. It means it's personal. It means if you move to any one of the meanings of these planets and it says AS, that means you're personally going to experience it.
All right.
See, like here's a good example. Watch. If I click on this gives me the basic meaning of this Pluto ascending line, which you can see powerful changes occur to you psychologically. It's all personal. See, so not to get too detailed in this session, but then you look at Saturn. Saturn's work done. So if someone moved on this Saturn line, which you can see runs right through Idaho, western Montana down here, they would find that this would be a place where a lot of responsibility and work would come to them. If they moved over here to say like Louisiana, where this Jupiter ascending line is, they'd find it be bliss. See? So every one of us are going to have planetary lines. And the good guys are always Sun, Jupiter, and Venus. And the tougher ones are always going to be Mars and Saturn and Pluto, and sometimes Neptune. Neptune can bring confusion. Neptune is the crescent of the moon over the cross. So these are powerful, like Mars IC lines. Your home and family becomes really intense and busy because it's on the fourth house cusp of home, family, and real estate. See? Mm-hmm. So the AS is personal, the MC is career, the DS is partnerships and relationships, and the IC is home, family, real estate. And again, this is just a simple language. Once you learn it, it becomes really, really, really clear. Now,
can we find lines where we get all of that, all of what we're looking for in life, all of those good energies?
A lot of times, I find many people have wonderful lines. And, people always say to me, Jeff, what's the best place to go live on? And I always go, well, there's a lot of flavors on the menu. And location astrology is certainly that menu. You're going to find we're all going to have combinations of things. The planets are by far the most powerful. But you can't just take this in isolation. This is why it's good to have a reading. It's nice to introduce people to this, but the old days where we would cast a relocation wheel for wherever you'd go. And as you go east and west, this wheel rotates. Your ascendant changes, your midheaven changes, and the placement of the houses changes. And that's really the best way to do it. And that's what I spend a lot of time looking at in a reading. But the maps are convenient because it puts the planets in locations that we can now tie to a geographic city or location. So it's very useful. But the good guys are always Sun, Jupiter, and Venus. Now, before we get too far, I want to just real briefly, because this could get very time consuming. If you look at the upper left-hand corner of the screen, and on YouTube here, it might be a little hard to see, but you can see where I'm highlighting, that's longitude. And the set of digits on the left is latitude. Those become our friends in location astrology. I think it's safe to say everybody's got an iPhone or a Droid, and we can all do location astrology ourselves by looking at where we live or where we want to be. So what's fun is when I put my cursor on a particular line, you can see this particular Jupiter line in this hypothetical example is at 91 degrees west 01. See that? You can actually see where I'm getting that at the upper left-hand corner of the screen, the right set of digits. If you were to go on any one of these lines where their longitude is, that's like going to a concert and standing in front of the band with your pant legs vibrating. It's very, very, very powerful. Now, 300 miles to the west is like the front row of the concert hall. 600's the back of the concert hall. And anything out past that's starting to get out in the parking lot. It gets real weak. But if anybody is familiar with a term in physics called the inverse square law, that's exactly how these work. They logarithmically increase up until you get right on them. So in other words, it's just like light and sound, decibels. It's a logarithmic exponential increase or decrease depending on closeness or the farther away you are. So when you're west of it, it's a long sloping bell curve. When you go east of it, it's much different. East of a line, 100 miles is the front row of the concert hall, 2 is the back, and 3 is off the radar screen. So again, a long sloping bell curve for every one of these planets and a very sharp Z curve to the east. And each planet is completely different in its energy. Mm-hmm. And we're going to do another video about the meanings of the planets, which is kind of fun. And you might want to watch that video.
Yeah.
Really, really good. Yeah. So that's the planets. But watch, and now I'm going to turn on. But wait, there's more. It's like a Romco commercial. So look at here. If we click on the add aspects, you can see the map's going to look like spaghetti. See? And if you like spaghetti, that's nice. Good. But yeah, it's a lot of detail. Now, what this is, these are geometric aspects. And again, this video is going to be really basic today. But it's fun because the more people get aware of this, the more they get out of their readings. Anytime you see triangles, you think good. Triangles is like going down the road listening to your favorite music, like the Doobie Brothers from the 70s, right? So, and squares are like traffic. Right? That's like Los Angeles traffic. It sucks. So the squares are no fun. The trines are good. Now, squares aren't necessarily bad. They're adjustments. They're 90. It's like slowing down at a stop sign or a stoplight and making a right or left or having to adjust yourself. So that's what squares are. And sometimes they make us grow. Sometimes they're good. And I always tell people there's really nothing that's good or bad. It's really energy. And if you understand the energy, it's amazing because you can actually take hard places and turn them around and utilize that energy to your benefit. It's like the art of war. Remember the art of war? We take what's bad and use it to our advantage.
Yeah, right.
Cool stuff. Yeah.
Especially if you're stuck in a place. Like a lot of people can't move. They literally can't move. So
that's exactly right.
It's important to understand those energies and how you can possibly work with them.
I'm so glad you brought that up because that is such a good point that she just made. And that is, I had to say, I love to tell this story. I had a psychiatrist friend and client who came to me once and he says, Jeff, he says, I think I'm losing my mind. I said, well, what happened? And he said, well, I moved to this location. He says, can you see anything that was going on? And I said, yeah, you just moved on a Moon-Pluto latitude crossing. Now, by the way, folks, all these horizontal lines are ley lines that are specific to each and every one of us. Every one of you, and including me, we all got them somewhere. They're our own personal ley lines. So he said to me, he says, what do you mean a Moon-Pluto line? So I explained it to him. I actually put it up. And it's just emotional intensity. It's like fingernails on the chalkboard. It's just grating emotionally. Yeah. He says, oh my God. He says, I've been on medication. He says, I've actually had a colleague prescribe me medication. He says, now I understand it's not me. And he couldn't move, like you said before. He couldn't move because he had the wife and the kids, in school, and she had the house and she liked it. And he set up his practice. He was really rooted in.
Yeah, yeah.
Now he tells me, in a way, I kind of like it. He says, because I have intensity that I can actually put to work where I can really
understands how to use it now. Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly right. It's like falling into the Mississippi River and trying to swim upstream. You won't win. But if you turn around and swim with it, wow, you might have a good time.
Well, isn't it interesting what he asked you is he was feeling like there was something wrong with him.
Exactly.
But there isn't anything wrong with him.
No, it was the energy
that helped him tremendously, I'm sure.
Yep. Absolutely. In a lot of readings, I get clients. I always feel so warm to my heart when I get done and someone's really depressed and I can tell like they're feeling very self-destructive, maybe sometimes in a way that's really bad. And I give them hope and not false hope either. I'll explain to them if they're in a particular cycle, or this is another thing we're going to talk about before we end today, is this is all natal. It's all natal, but you also have transits and progressions wherever you live. We're going to show this real briefly. So that was a good thing to talk about. Anyways, let's get through this real quick because I only have limited time here in this podcast today. But you can see the trines are really good. Now, we didn't talk about this. The planets actually end up becoming conjunctions, which is a circle with the lineup. So those are the planets. You'll notice if I take away the aspects, see, these planets are still there with a conjunction. See, so here's the point. I know there's a lot of detail. The aspects act differently than the planets. If you get right on them, and again, you can use longitude and latitude to identify each one. You literally will find that's like, again, standing in front of the band with your pant legs vibrating. And when they're good, they're good. And each respective planet has its meaning, and trines always bring smooth flow energy. So like if something's on the descendant, it's partnerships and relationships. If it's on the ascendant, it's personal. If it's on the midheaven, it's career, you see? So, or the IC is home, family, real estate. So it's really logical once you get this little science down. The aspects have maximum a 300-mile influence. Right on them is standing in front of the band with your pant legs vibrating. 100 miles either side is the front, well, the concert hall, and 200 is the back, and 300 is pretty much off the radar screen. So really the first 100 miles is where the real energy is, and they exponentially increase. Now, the last one to go through is these horizontal latitude crossings known as Perons. That was the story we just told about the psychiatrist. That was what he was on. These are very narrow. And notice up here at the upper left-hand corner, if I place my cursor on one, you can see this particular one's at 41 North, 2613. You can see where I'm getting that. Every one of these is completely different. That's Moon Uranus, kooky emotions, but not bad. This one down here is Venus Pluto. Very dramatic, you see. Every single one of these is totally specific to the energy it has. So every individual will experience it their own unique way. Here's the point. No matter what the energy is, if you're right on one, that's like standing in front of the band with your pant legs vibrating. And you got to blend all this together. 10 miles north or south is the front row of the concert hall. 20 is the back of the concert hall, and 30 is out in the parking lot. You see, and 30, some astrologers argue with me, well, I can feel them 60 miles. Okay, great. But for the rest of the human race, including myself, I've only noticed that they only go about 30 miles north and south. Some psychics can really feel this stuff much more sensitively, so I do respect what they say.
Yeah.
But that's the basics. Now, there's one more, but I think to keep this podcast simple, you can see why I don't turn them on. It gets pretty busy. There's two more things. One is fixed stars. And if you think that was complex, wait till I select fixed stars.
Yeah.
That one there will blow your hair back. So if we just open the Ptolemaic fixed stars and you click, them to, I can tell you it's exceedingly complex. The map almost becomes solid. You only look at these things in very specific locations. But this is all the natal. Okay, now if that didn't make your eyeballs cross, the next might. Then you look at the transits and progressions. And this is totally cool because we can look at outer transits and literally you can see them moving. You can animate them. We only look at the outer transits. So this is a lot of work for me just to map out, make significance out of whatever someone has going on. And you only look at the outer transits. The other one that we look at very carefully is the rest of these. These are called progressions and secondary progressions, solar arc, primary directions. It's a lot of detail, but it can drastically affect a particular person's life. And you can see, you can animate all this stuff. So that's a real basic look at some of the amazing utility of the science, and it truly is a science, of location astrology. This is not hocus pocus. It's not smoke and mirrors. It is science, folks. Yeah. You take your birth chart, you extrapolate it across the globe. I cannot tell you how many people I've done this for over the years. It's stunning. And myself, it's been stunning. I have seen things in my own life. I mean, my jaw drops. It's absolutely.
Well, mine too. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mine too. What I think is,
yes, we have really seen a lot, and your chart, and I see it every day in everybody's chart.
We've seen so much. One thing that comes to my mind is someone could move to a specific line to, let's say, if they're looking to write a book and want to be very creative, need that kind of support. Or,
yes.
If they're looking to develop something specific in themselves, or if they're looking for a relationship, maybe there'd be a specific line to go to.
You have no idea. I'm so glad you brought.
Have to move there.
So glad you brought that up. All the time I get people asking me, Jeff, where can I go to do this? I'll select for stuff like you're mentioning, Mercury, Jupiter lines, excellent for writers. Mercury, Uranus lines. Every single person I've ever done a reading for who is on a Mercury, Uranus line, they're inventing things, they're copywriting things, they're designing things, they're coming up with new innovative technologies. Amazing.
It's all about energy. It really
it's all energy.
All energy. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And I've seen people who've moved to places, or they'll live in their hometown and they'll say, oh my God, what's going on? This has been so hard. And I'll often find they'll have a Pluto transit or a Pluto progression or some other challenging aspect.
Right.
And the beauty is once it goes bye-bye, it's over. And some of these aspects are a once in a lifetime aspect. You figure a Uranus progression or transit, particularly transit, only going to come around, that particular one, once every 84 to 87, 88 years.
Well, thank God. And thank God they move.
They do move. And you can thank God. It's probably because of God it's moving. But yes.
Right.
In this case, you actually can. So
yeah.
So that's a real basic look at location astrology. And by the way, we could have went in, and maybe we will. I'm going to try and do a little bit of news like that at the beginning. Even the United States itself has a birth chart, and it's very interesting. We've had some very deceptive energy coming over the District of Criminals, also known as Washington, D.C. Used to be the District of Columbia, and very, very powerful stuff. So yeah, we'll look at that next time in the location astrology. And I hope this helps people to just get a basic understanding of how this stuff works. It's a lot of information to get.
Yeah.
But if you watch it, a couple times, you'll get it.
You'll get it.
I know I went quick, but you'll get it. It's amazing.
Yeah, you'll start to connect. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for going on.
You bet.
Thank you, everyone, joining us today.